Last week I talked about the so-called Dendera light, a sacred carving that very superficially resembles a light bulb, if you squint, and ignore the fact that it's obviously a snake. Anyway, it's part of a larger complex, and a very complex complex. Nowadays, you tend to hear of the Dendera site as the Temple to Hathor, but this obscures the long and many-layered history of a place that was a holy site for multiple religious groups over 2.5 millennia. The truth is, though, that when you look at the site today, almost nothing that you can see is what most would call ancient Egyptian. The striking Temple of Hathor itself is a comparatively recent structure, having been built somewhere between the reigns of the pharaohs Nero and Trajan. Here's a dedication to Trajan, depicted as pharaoh on the outer wall of the temple. Now, a lot actually depends on how you define the phrase Temple of Hathor. It's believed that there has been a temple on that site for most of the 2,000 years preceding Trajan's life, so perhaps it would be more accurate to say that the most recent version of the temple dates to the Roman period. Going a bit further back, this beautiful sanctuary of Isis, herself a very popular goddess in Rome and very possibly the reason the Virgin Mary became a figure of worship herself in early Christianity, has an inscription dating to the reign of Augustus, that is, the pharaoh Setepenptah. The earliest building that archaeologists, and only archaeologists, would call intact is this shrine, which was built in the reign of Nectanebo II, the last native pharaoh. Speaking of last pharaohs, both Cleopatra VII and her son Ptolemy Caesarion are featured elsewhere in the complex, so Dendera is accidentally the site of several commemorations to arguably last pharaohs. The Nectanebo era structure is a type of shrine called a mamisi, which comes from an Egyptian word meaning house of birth. Shrines like this depict the birth of a divine being. Those who saw last week's video will know that the main temple commemorates in part the birth of Horus. In a more just world, another wonder you could see at Dendera would be the Dendera zodiac, a breathtakingly detailed bas-relief housed in France's foremost colonial treasure hoard, the Louvre. In its current monochrome state, its beauty and detail are harder to appreciate, but several artists have reconstructed the original colouring, or close to it. And you can see from this piece how striking it may once have been. For the record, the artist here has elected not to colour in the central figures which represent constellations, but these would have been in full glorious technicolor in the original ceiling. Found in a shrine to Osiris, the zodiac depicts major stars and of course the constellations of the zodiac. Being a piece that dates to the Grecian period around the early 50s BCE, some of the constellations are represented by familiar shapes, a ram for Aries for example, a scorpion for Scorpio and so on, while others use Egyptian iconography. The 36 figures around the edge, by the way, divide the sky, and therefore time, into 36 periods. This works in two ways. There were 36 hours in an Egyptian day, their hours were about 40 minutes long by our reckoning, and there are 36 weeks in the standard Egyptian year. Their weeks were 10 days long. Its depiction of two datable events, a solar eclipse in 51 BCE and a lunar eclipse the year before, allows us to date its construction to somewhere around 50 BCE. I mentioned somewhat glibly that the zodiac was plundered, but in fact it was plundered very destructively. You can see the crack down one part of it here. It was removed brutally, with tools including saws and gunpowder. Always remember, whenever we talk about the theft of ancient artifacts, we mustn't imagine some Indiana Jones figure sneaking in with a weighted bag. Violence is inherent to the process. The latest construction on the site is not only not pharaonic, it isn't dedicated to Hathor, Horus, or any of the other Egyptian gods celebrated at the site. It is a Coptic, that is to say Christian, church, dating to the 5th century CE, which is after the end of hieroglyphic writing and the final spurts of ancient Egyptian indigenous religious practice. As a time capsule, scratch that, as a series of time capsules, the Dendera temple complex is more or less unrivaled in Egypt. It's a wonderful example of how the idea of a site being holy can be taken in different ways by the same civilization over time, and even co-opted by new paradigms both politically and religiously. In particular, the Coptic Church fascinates me. Christianity, in my armchair view anyway, gestated in Egypt more than anywhere else. The Copts were, and are, indigenous Egyptians. And although Christianity is something we tend to think of as a Middle Eastern seed that germinated in Rome, its roots dig into the rich dark bed of the Nile. And here at Dendera we see an idea from outside, adopted and commemorated by indigenous Egyptians. Neither being Christian nor Egyptian, I don't have anything very personal to say on the matter, but it does make me think that history would have been all that much more symmetrical if there were a 9th century mosque on the site as well. Thanks for watching, and thanks for your very engaging comments of late. I guess I've been told very clearly that we like to see some fringe theories discussed around here. I'll put some thought into that. I want to handle these sorts of things respectfully, which can be hard when it's light bulbs and helicopters, but I'll try to do my best. The dainty but technicolor figures that encircle me in an eternal ballet of the twinkling night are my backers at patreon.com/armchairegypt. Thanks as always, I couldn't do it without you. Or at least, who knows if I would. Until next time, my fellow armchair Egyptologists, life, prosperity and health to you all. Thanks for watching. Head over to my channel for more, or click here to see what the YouTube demons think you should watch next. I hope you'll consider subscribing. If you'd like to support and collaborate on the channel with me, go to patreon.com/armchairegypt. You can also join my Discord community, there's an invite link in the description.